To whom much is given, much is required. Part of that requirement is sharing. Culture is the heartbeat within our lives, and it's at the core of so many things. While we live in a time when we are starving for wisdom, I welcome you to your wisdom retreat at Culture Raises Us. So today's guest, super excited to have my guy, Dennis TODISCO on, who's globally known as a leader in the digital marketing space with a deep understanding of the social media landscape and its influence on culture. He spent time at Meta and Instagram, Twitter, Nike, actually where we met years ago. And he's also the founder of Outfit Grid. I'll let him provide more color to this and himself after we, step into our signature question of, when you hear culture, what does that mean to you, my friend?
First off, thank you for having me on. It's such an honor. Big
Pleasure.
Big fan of you, of course. It's been years. Great to see your smile, man. I'm hyped to be on. What does culture mean to me? I mean, it's family, it's values, it's what I identify with. I think there's really maybe two forms of culture, broadly speaking. There's a culture you're born into, and there's cultures that you can become a part of through life experiences.
Love that. Yeah, and speaking of that, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background, which will probably give a little bit more depth on the family piece that you're speaking to, as we'll then talk about the other component of culture that you play a big part in terms of youth culture and how social media plays a part within that.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Boston, Italian-American family, fourth generation. My great grandfather came here with $50, got on a ship for weeks. And, it's kind of hard to fathom even doing that today, no phone, no Yelp of, hey, what does New York look like?
How about that?
Like, I know, had a big leap of faith, right? So that's the culture that I grew up with, a lot of Italian-American traditions, as you could imagine, big dinners on Sunday, being scared of your parents, not just kidding, but reverence now with elders,
Absolutely. So
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
no, go for it. No,
You got to finish telling the story about you.
no, I mean, yeah, that's it's a big part of who I am. I think like my culture, my family's culture, the traditions, I'm very proud of who I am and my family and my background. And I think it's played a big influence in kind of my work ethic, who I've really turned out to be as an adult.
That's awesome. As I look at, social media has obviously played a very significant role in shaping culture as we know it, right? With all the roles you've had a part in creating and the companies you've worked with over the years, what was a particular moment where you realized just how big and instrumental this social media culture was to our overall culture of life?
It's a great question. It's funny because I remember the early days of, maybe like 2011, 2012, like getting on Twitter and people in the Karma Loop office, for those of you that remember, early streetwear startup in Boston. The game very well. So
Absolutely.
I remember getting roasted in the office, like, oh, you tweeting what you're eating right now or what you're doing, and like people didn't really fully understand the context of how big this thing was going to be. And then, of course, Facebook pages, Instagram. And I think it was really probably around the time when Instagram started popping that, like, I think that's when we started realizing the significance of culture and like online culture and Instagram culture. That was kind of like the tipping point, I would say, of when your digital persona became really important to your real life component. And the things that you were doing online kind of fueled what you were doing in real life, and then vice versa. And then I think we got to this point where like we have built a world that almost exists around your digital identity. You go to restaurants now and the lighting is particularly set up so people can take good Instagram stories. You go to pop-ups and there's like, where's the shareable moment? If you talk with agencies, that's what they're focused on when working on brand pop-ups. And there's so much emphasis on the digital identity now that it's really fascinating to see that moment where it became, I don't want to say necessarily more important than your in person.
I mean, that might be factual though. I mean, the value and equity that's there, it's substantial.
It's substantial. And when you talk about viewership, I mean, if I'm at a physical event, there's only so many people I can impact there. It's probably a handful versus, or, maybe a couple hundred, versus if I'm online, the potential is limitless, right? I mean,
Right.
you post something, it could be seen by anyone. I mean, there's billions of users on Instagram monthly. And, obviously if you factor in TikTok, Twitter, I mean, literally the whole world can see what you're doing. So
Yeah, if they're given access to it, but that's a whole nother
of course, of course. I'm saying this in the sense of like publicly sharing. I mean, the potential is far greater
endless.
than the physical. Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned something that was pretty key in terms of the digital you and the in-person you. And I think when you look at social media, it's perhaps the most powerful branding and community building tool I think we've ever seen to date, like hands down. What are some of the key ways that you see up and coming cultivators? Because that's a big part of this platform, right? Which I deem you as well, with all the things that you've done within this space. But what are some of the key ways that up and coming cultivators and creators should be leveraging these platforms today?
It's one of the most effective ways to build community. I started Outfit Grid, for example, back in 2012, and it was really just this very organic concept of me sharing what I'm wearing for the day, laying it down in a grid. And I was like, I don't know, what should I call this thing? It's my outfit. It's in a grid. I don't know, Outfit Grid. Does anyone have this handle? No. Okay, cool. Let me get that. Let me just go ahead and trademark this thing just in case. Did that, got the domain, all that. And we're talking 2012. I had no clue there was going to be brand deals. I didn't, I've done brand deals with Mr. Porter, with Nike, with PacSun. I've been very blessed in that respect. But the thing that's really mostly powerful and what we're talking about is building community. And I just put a simple idea out there to the world. And there are people globally every day who are posting and sharing,
right?
And they connect over this shared love of clothing, of sneakers, of just putting things together and learning about how to style pieces or what's new or maybe what's old, like some cool vintage. It's just a great community builder. So my advice is for people who are looking at Instagram or other communities as like a tool for that, like, you got to jump in, you got to be active, you got to not be afraid to just put an idea out there. I know there's a lot of pressure sometimes we put on ourselves when we're right before we're pressing that post button, but the reality is, it's pretty insignificant. And like, if it doesn't perform, it doesn't perform, but just put something out there. And what's the worst thing that happens?
Yeah, I'm almost looking at you right now. We're gonna have you be like a social media therapist, and what I mean by that is because you're talking about building this community, and you also mentioned another key word in connection. You mentioned connection, but I think even one of the things that I'm noticing with social media, it could be a major, and I don't want to call it a deterrent, but at times it's seemingly a place where people don't feel like their work, their vision, their art is truly being seen by those that it should be, right? And so this goes into the thing called the algorithm. So it's this thing, it's this notion of how can you help people understand to stick to your vision and not get caught up in the algorithm, right? Because for so many, and you've mentioned it already, oh, the reach, all these people, it's endless. But when you don't start to reach the people that you think you should, that could become very discouraging. And now you're questioning your vision and your art. So as Dennis, the therapist in the social media space, how do you help creatives and cultivators push through that and remind themselves it's the vision over the algorithm?
You have to remember why you have a following in the first place. There was a reason why you are doing what you're doing. Remember that core reason. Remember why you got on this platform. It was to share what you're interested in, what you believe in, just to share your art, share your thoughts. Stick to that. People follow you for that reason. Yes, look, the reality is social media is now more noisy than ever. there's more content than ever. We're consuming a lot on a daily basis. And the reality is not everything is going to be seen. And algorithms were created because it actually was to solve that problem, in the sense that people were missing important posts. Let's say you follow a celebrity and they post 12 times in a row in a chronological timeline. You might miss something really important that your best friend posted on that 13th post because you got fatigued from scrolling. So the point of the algorithm is supposed to be to surface great content that's highly engaging. The reality with people's frustration with that is they're like, oh, well, it's not the same reach I used to get, or it's not the same. And I think the thing to remember is like not to get frustrated and just understand that like this is the world that we're in. We're not in 2014. We're not in.
That's right.
Platforms have changed. Content has changed. I mean, the phone we're using has changed. Everything has evolved, and you just need to stick to your gut and understand that like what you're putting out there is your truth, your honesty. And I think what happens is people try to, bend too far into trends or doing something that,
clickbait.
Exactly. And it's like, it's not the crux of why you started this thing in the first place. So always go back to that. Always be confident about what you're posting and understand that like some things just aren't going to hit. And you know what? That's great. The people that are going to see that are going to love that and appreciate it for you. And you just got to keep building.
You did a great job at your first client as the social media therapist, Dennis, right there with your response, because you took it to the root of remembering your why, which is something that we speak about a ton on this platform. And if you remember your why, you never lose your way. And if you keep those tools in your toolbox, it'll prevent you from getting caught up in the hurdles of the algorithms, because there's major hurdles, and help you to stick true to your vision for sure. So kudos to you, social media therapist, Dennis. I love that. Black culture, as you know, is quite often appropriated or used to kind of inspire other cultures and industries. Given that, I would love to get your thoughts on platforms like Spill, which just launched and has a very distinct focus and purpose to kind of ensure that there's an authentic space for marginalized voices. What's your thoughts on the presence of Spill?
Yeah, love Spill. Love what Alfonso and his team are building. I think it's definitely a sign of the times. It's a response to what's been happening on Twitter. I mean, you look at marginalized voices, you look at Black Twitter in particularly, which culturally was really like the biggest driving force of information, humor, content on Twitter. And then you look at the reflection of who that community is serving and who the C-level executives are that are leading that company. And there's a huge disconnect.
There's a major disparity there, social media therapist, Dennis.
Huge disparity. And you look at, take a screenshot of the Fortune 500 companies. How many Black CEOs are there? I think it's up to 8 now, which is, by the way, the all-time high.
That's absurd.
That's terrible. And it's even, it's also terrible for women too. I think it's 10% of Fortune 500 companies are run by women CEOs. And we talk about progress, and it's just happening so slowly. And I think that's frustration. We've gone through Me Too, we've gone through BLM, we've gone through all of these what felt like big cultural movements, but it hasn't been reflected fast enough in corporate America. And I think platforms are going to start popping up that are led by the communities that they originally really made pop in the first place. So I'm a big fan of Spill in that aspect. I'm not on the platform yet, still waiting for my code, but
we'll make that happen. We'll make that happen for you.
Shout out Spill. But yeah, I think it's just a strong response. It's like what we saw when we talk about all like the disruptor brands that popped up over the last like 10 years in consumer goods. There was that disconnect with like the companies that own it and who's the consumer they're serving. So I'm a big fan of it. I would love to see more progress, especially as it pertains to like diversity and inclusiveness and leadership in these platforms. And I can't say I'm surprised that a company like Spill, what was it, #1 in the App Store a few weeks ago. So
Yeah.
it's not surprised.
Yeah, it's funny when you just mentioned disruptor brands, and it's almost like we need to reconfigure the use of what constitutes disruptor, right? Those brands probably shouldn't be looked at as the disruptors. It's the ones that have probably been acting in the way that they have and
Exactly.
being or trying to monopolize these marketplaces without being a reflection of the actual culture and the market as the disruptors. As you were saying that, I was like, man, it's time for a switch there as well, like for us to rethink that whole thought process and positioning. But I do think, part of culture, and you talked about this evolving, is having different perspectives, right? And voices that contribute to their interpretation of it, or the opportunity they see within it. And when I see the likes of even Threads, which we'll talk about, right? And Spill enter into this Twitter space, I got to ask you, and I think you kind of alluded to it, is it a coincidence that they're all appearing right now?
No, I don't
Right.
think it's a coincidence at all. I mean, it's a strong reaction to what happened on Twitter. I mean, Elon took over, and especially if you were, I mean, I feel completely turned off by the platform since he came in, and
Mm,
I can't imagine, identifying as somebody. Imagine if if you already felt marginalized under the
right.
previous Twitter leadership, and now it's like, wow, we're in new territory where we have posts being like their reach being reduced even further because you're not paying. Like you can't even read a certain amount of tweets in a day if you're not paying. Your blue check you work super hard for disappeared. Like there's just and now we have someone at the helm who was essentially known for aligning with some very bad people on the far right who
Mm.
have spewed bad things, and it makes a lot of sense why people are leaving that platform.
And creating new ones.
Exactly. And I think when we talk about Threads, and this was the biggest challenge that any new platform faces, it's building that new following. And that was the big advantage that Threads had was, hey, we already have this social graph of users. Like,
What was the number? What was the number in the first day?
well, the first day I think it was 10 million within the first 24 hours, and then 100 million within 5 days, I believe. I mean, the numbers were incredible, but when you make that transition so seamless and you port your followers, you port your social graph. I mean, if I'm signing up for a network and I already have 8,000 followers before I even finish setting up my profile. I mean, that's a huge incentive for me
It's
versus
currency.
exactly versus starting 0 to 1 on Blue Sky or another platform. So that's the advantage that Meta has, and it's powerful. I mean, we're seeing that manifested, and that's what users want. People want to be able to have their audience come with them, and that, to your point, like with the algorithm, that's like the big frustration is like, hey, I cultivated this audience. I should be able to bring this with me wherever I go and speak to these people. So that's what I think is coming to life through with Threads. And I think that's kind of like emblematic of like this bigger, when we talk about like Web3 discussion of like owning your data, and then we
Right.
can get into this discussion of like owning your followers or owning like this thing that you built, rather than having it in the hands of like servers or platforms or things that
Platform.
you won't have access to. So I think that's powerful, like this thought of like openness and ownership. And that's where I think Threads got that piece, at least the start of that conversation is
Right.
interesting. And I think when we talk about social media in the future, I think that's where things are headed.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think when you look at most of these legacy social platforms, other than TikTok, they've all been around for like 10 plus years, I believe. And we haven't seen a new social platform take off and last with large scale audience, right? So what do you feel is kind of the thing that is needed or is missing in this space to make it stick and last?
Well, I think it's it's exactly what I was describing. It's being able to take your audience with you. I
That's
think
right.
that's what everyone wants at this point. I would find it very hard for a new network to pop up now and completely dominate at the numbers that we're talking, like a Facebook or a TikTok could in theory, or an Instagram could do today. It would be very challenging. It would have to be something that we haven't thought of yet. That's just like super next level, and everybody needs to be on there. And it'd have to be very addictive, and uh, it would it would be crazy, but it's possible. I mean, it's
Right.
totally possible. But I think the thing that people want to be able to do is port their followers, port their brand that they built, and take that with them on whatever is next.
No, that's huge, and I think with all the I just always look at there's so much access and tools that I think independent creators have today. Like it is mind blowing the tools that they have in comparison to that of even 10 or 20 years ago to creators coming up. Do you think that going in-house at a brand though, in-house at a brand is still imperative?
There's pros and cons.
Okay.
So in terms of being a creator, I think there's incredible benefits to being a part of a brand in terms of it's going to legitimize you in ways that perhaps you can't completely on your own.
Okay.
I anecdotally working for Nike was definitely a great thing to have on my resume. I mean, I learned so much being a part of that organization. I've forged a lot of friendships. It was like getting my master's in a global matrix
That's right.
organization in many ways. And that was something that I wouldn't be able to do necessarily entirely myself as a creator. Um, but that being said, it might not be the path for everyone. And
Right.
there's definitely a huge opportunity now more than ever in the point of human history.
Whether you're searching for the latest sneaker drop, that iconic handbag, a timeless watch, or your next piece of classic jewelry, eBay authenticators are there verifying every detail of your purchase. Yep, we're talking each inch, stitch, tick, facet, and clasp that make the piece you're searching for worthy of your collection. eBay's authenticators are experts in their craft, true connoisseurs. And as leaders in their fields, they're making sure your items always arrive as authentic as your style. So go ahead, get that piece you've always wanted, and leave it up to the meticulous eyes of an eBay authenticator to make sure that watch movement is original, that glimmer is real gold, that rare sneaker is legit, or that handbag is really made of genuine leather and never get faked over again. In a world full of fakes, it's time to get real with eBay Authenticity Guarantee. Everyone deserves real. Visit ebay.com for terms.
To just be your authentic self, put that out there on the internet, and build a successful small business where you can just make a living being yourself and creating content against that every day. And that's pretty interesting. And, it's not the traditional 9 to 5 by any means. It's kind of a 24/7 in that aspect, but, you're not part of the corporate grind. So pros and cons, definitely. If people have the opportunity to try both, I think that's an amazing blessing. But if you're also building that following yourself, go all in. I mean, it's there. The opportunity's there. And you don't need to have a lot of followers to have a successful business. I mean, you could have 50,000 followers, 30,000 followers, and be on your own.
That's right.
I know plenty of people who are making six figures with under 100K followers, and that's incredible. And that's something it's a sustainable living.
That's a great living, a great living. And you said it. I mean, you teed it up in the beginning of, and you're being your authentic self. Like you are, which is the absolute best part. And I think the more we can provide spaces and platforms for everybody to be their authentic self, and if there's an opportunity to be compensated for that, I mean, that's the cherry on top of the cake. And I think it starts to create an environment and a space where everybody is supporting the gifts that each one of us has, right? And the nuances of differentiation, and the beauty of that, to a point where and you can live your life and finance it through this, which is huge. And so I think this is kind of a trend. I don't want to call it a trend, but I would also like to think, what kind of trends do you see within the brand development space and the creator community that are temporary and which are here to stay for the long haul in your eyes? And I ask that question now because as you're talking about, you've made a lot of evolution statements, right? Taking your followers with you, right? From, certain different platforms is something that's enticing. Being able to be your authentic self and build a business and a career on that, right? So that sounds like something that you're talking about, hopefully, is not a temporary thing, but something that can last for the long haul. What are some of those the ones that you feel are kind of temporary, and also some of the ones that you think are kind of the long haul opportunities in this space?
In addition to that long haul, I think we're seeing positivity and creating a space for that as a long-term thing. I think there was, for better or worse, because there was a lot of funny content that came out of it. But when you look back at the Twitter days, there was a lot of hate, right? It was a lot of people who were, and that content did well. The reality of it is people spewing hatred or dogpiling on something. It's easy to do. It's
so easy.
It's a very negative thing, and it feeds hatred. And by the way, you don't feel great after spending hours scrolling through all that. You just
that
get
part.
angry,
You really don't,
right? You just get angry, and whether it, depending on your political affiliation. I mean, I used to spend hours on Twitter, like just getting mad, and scrolling through and being, oh, Trump did this today, or like, I can't believe, they want to, they're doing this with DACA. They're trying to get rid of the Dreamer program, like just, and I would get so worked up. And the reality, I think now is people are fatigued. People don't want to be on a platform that's just negativity. And I think we're seeing that. And again, it's early days of Threads, but
yeah,
at least at the beginning, I mean, it feels like the community is more about positivity, which is a beautiful thing. And I think that's more of a long-term trend to me. And I hope that continues, because the reality is it takes a lot to put yourself out there, especially on social media. And like, that's why I say sometimes people hesitate when they're about to press that post button, because, you're like, damn, what if people hate this? What if they think it's corny? What if they don't think this is funny? Or what if, and like, it takes a lot of courage, and you should feel like energy from that. You should feel good about that. You should have a network of people supporting you and raising you up and being like, yo, that was dope, or like, I love that fit, or that was hilarious, things like that. Like, I think the cool guy era is gone. I think people being too cool to like things, or too cool to say someone's doing a good job, like give people flowers while they can still smell them.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the positivity piece. So glad, because you're right. I mean, we have an opportunity to flip the narrative and look at, my man Bobby Jones is behind being good is the new cool, right? And whatever we can do within our respective worlds, we should be doing that work to make and applauding good being the new cool. Like, let's make those the new influencers. Let's make those services the new services of choice that everybody should galvanize around. And at times, I feel like we forget that we have the authority and the ability and the choices that we can make to do that. I almost feel like we forget, like we're in charge. We can create that narrative, right? It's actually on us to do so. And I look at, content and social media. I very much look at like how you consume food. Like, you're very cognizant on the type of food that you take in your body, right? Like, you can't eat mac and cheese every damn day. You're not going to be in the bed. Like, we can't eat what you grill like every other day, Dennis, when you're out there doing your whole deal. Like, that's not every day, right? You have to break it up, right? Just once in a while. You got to break it up. So to your point, like, the consumption of content that you take from social media, you've got to be very cognizant of. very cognizant. And sometimes we get so caught up that we forget. And now you're, to your point, you're just scrolling down, 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 down. And you're like in this rabbit hole of negativity.
Exactly.
How do we get to the rabbit hole of positivity?
It's on us. We got to change. We got to, you know what's cool? Being nice.
Boom.
Treat others, golden rule. And it can exist on social media. Treat others how you want to be treated. It's
mic dropped. It's simple, right? We so often forget about the core principles of things, that we lose sight of the things that are possible and right in front of us. And so I'm so glad that the positivity piece was at the forefront of your comment there. And as I want to get back to the brand partnerships piece, because you obviously have some great insight and experience there. And for creators looking to get into these brand partnerships now, I think, what are the insights you would share with them to help protect them from being taken advantage of, and tips to kind of help them maximize their opportunities within these partnerships?
Absolutely. It's cliche, but know your worth. Know that you're bringing something to the table as a creator that would cost a lot for an agency to do if they were to hire a photographer, hire a media, whether it's a media buy or a media outlet to promote something. You're doing both as a creator. You're both the content producer and the media distribution. And like, that's very valuable. And that's why the creator economy has grown so much over the last few years. And the reality is, brands are the agencies that reach out, the brands that reach out, sometimes they're not always coming correct with the offers. You know, they're going to oftentimes, I mean, depending on who you're working with, they're usually going to try to lowball you first and foremost. Like, that first offer is almost always negotiable. I recommend every creator definitely always negotiate that first offer, no matter what it is. I guarantee you'll get at least 10% more. Probably, you can probably get maybe even 20, 30, 50% more, maybe even 100% more. I've been in situations like that. The reality is, if you start, pushing back here and there, getting better rates, you start establishing like what your rate card is, talk to other friends who have similar followings as you, similar content creation styles as you, understand what they're charging brands. Like, I think we need more transparency amongst creators. Like, I'll be honest with you, like, the first time I ever did a brand deal, I'm pretty sure I texted Timmy, 13th Witness, and Trash Hand, and it was like shooting some stuff for Nike. This was way before I worked at Nike, and it was just like a really quick post outside of Fenway Park. And I remember texting them like, "Yo, what do you guys charge Nike to like do a post?" And they were giving me like some tips, and obviously I wasn't as big as them, and still aren't in terms of like following or talent. Those guys are incredible, but I just basically kind of use that as a scale, and I'm like, all right, if I have 10% of the followers of Trash Hand at that time, like, maybe I could do this, maybe I could, and like, it worked out. So ask around, understand your worth. Don't get blinded by just because someone's reaching out to you, and negotiate. Always negotiate.
Oh, and I'm so glad you gave those, because one of the things that you mentioned there that's so powerful is this notion of transparency. Like, we don't communicate with each other. I don't know what that's based off of. If it's a competitive thing, or if it's not wanting everybody kind of in your kitchen, not wanting to ask about what's in somebody else's kitchen. And but I think those walls have to be broken down, but it also has to be on the receiving end of it, a welcomeness to be able to share. And so that's another, I think, superpower that we like to highlight on this platform, is the superpower of sharing. Like, you got shared with that knowledge to better help you negotiate your value, because again, you understood there's a significant value that you bring to the table as an other. I use an other because there's something different with each one of us, and something different with Dennis as the creator. And so, understand your value. You don't want to shortchange yourself because you haven't had experience in negotiating in this space, right? So you tapped into your network. Now, your network was kind enough and open enough to share. Now, had they not shared, who knows where you would have been? Who knows where your value proposition would have ended up, right? So it's like this responsibility and accountability that we all need to have to share. Like share. You're not losing anything. We're actually gaining because guess what? When you win, we all can win.
1,000%. And the reality is, if you accept something at a lower price, or I accept something at a lower price, then that becomes kind of it brings it all down, right?
The bar is now coming down.
Exactly. Let's instead lift that up together. So work together with creators, build that community, and trust your friends. And yeah, it should be a positive thing. And make sure you get paid, because the money's there. 100%. The money's there.
Yeah, and I like asking people like you your thoughts on leaders or leadership, right? And for a number of reasons, because leadership comes from all different levels. I've never been one to think that leadership qualities just come from quote unquote superiors, right? So what traits do you believe make up like a visionary leader? And what steps does it require to kind of bring a vision to life?
A leader to me is somebody who's in the trenches with you. It's not somebody who's barking the orders from far away. It's someone who's leading from the front. And I think having empathy is probably the most important trait a leader can have, because it means you understand what everyone that you're asking to do something is feeling and going through. And I think it's super important for people to, especially leaders, to have experience in doing the things, doing the roles that they're now in charge of or overseeing, so that they understand like what actually goes into this. There's all those memes of like the hovering creative director, like someone like over your shoulder trying to like, oh, just change that, do that. And like, if you're a designer and you've been in Illustrator in like the weeds of Illustrator, like this stuff is challenging. Like it's not, I mean, granted, there's been a lot of improvements with AI and these processes have gotten easier, but it's still not that simple. And I could say the same about like copywriters, or I could say the same about, someone that's writing a playbook, or someone that's like, you have to do that work yourself to gain that empathy and to gain those skills. And then you can understand like what it's like to lead a team and have someone do those things for you.
Love that. We normally end this with like the 3 C's that we're going to get to, but for you, there were a couple of threes. I want to do this shotgun 3 exercise with you, and I want to give from you. The first one is top 3 social media moments. Top 3 that come to your head.
Top 3 social media moments. Oh wow. Probably John Mayer following Outfit Grid and DMing me.
And wow, that's dope.
That was super cool. I mean,
what did he say?
He said, I appreciate the purity of it. It takes away the micro judgments of someone wearing it.
Wow. Thoughtful. That's deep.
It was like very, very insightful. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's a very deep guy. Like whenever I DM with him, it's always super insightful. It's not just like, what's up, bro? Like that kind of, it's always
not surface. It's deep. Like that, what you just said. And I'm thinking about the proposition. I'm like, that was legendary.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's one.
That's one. Number 2, and this was some time ago, but when Kanye posted an Outfit Grid, that was quite a moment.
Nice.
That was cool. I mean, obviously my feelings have shifted a little bit on Ye as of lately, but we're still hopeful one day he'll come back and go on the apology tour and we'll all forgive him and he'll right the wrongs. But that was number 2. And then number 3 was probably just very basic, but the day that it was really like that first week I launched Outfit Grid, just having other people post their Outfit Grids and tag me in it. And that was just like really the genesis of this thing being something bigger than I could have ever imagined. That it really was it was a community. It's bigger than just me sharing what I'm wearing. It's about a community coming together and sharing their love of clothes, of style, of sneakers. So that was a really awesome moment.
Huge. Next one, top three footwear, shoes.
Specific like silhouettes.
Let's go silhouette. And if you want to go to the detail of the actual version or one, please feel free.
I could.
Oh, I'm sure you can. That's why I'm asking you this question.
Want to go? I mean, all right. So it might not be. All right. So I got to go with the OG Jordan 1, obviously. Bread.
Okay.
If we're talking the original year, but I will say the O1s are the red that is used on the O1s is just, it pops differently than all the other years. So I'm going to say O1 red Jordan 1s. I know that might be
very nice,
a little controversial. And then I'm going to say this is also a very basic answer, but just white Air Force One lows. Just, it's the one shoe if I was stranded on an island. I mean, I don't know why I would ask for sneakers. It probably better to get something more sustainable, but if it had to be shoes, it would probably be white Air Force Ones, just because I know I'm going to be good. I'm going to look fresh and probably die of starvation. But yeah, I'll have some nice shoes that go with everything. And then probably going bread fours. I mean, that's just the cement fours. Like, that's
classic. Can never go wrong.
Can't go wrong. I mean, honestly, even the last few years that they put the Nike Air back on it, those were great as well. But I would probably go OG. They're just not wearable because the air bubble would have
literally done.
I have a pair and they're toast and they're dead.
Yeah.
But I got to do a soul swap.
Great choices. Great choices. And so that leads us into, as I mentioned, the last kind of question that we always close with is we talk about these 3 seeds, or seeds that we plant and water and kind of blossom into these amazing things, as, cultivators like yourself have been a part of. But what would be the 3 seeds you'd want to kind of leave with the stewards of culture moving forward?
Number 1 is do it with passion or don't do it at all. I see too many times people doing something for money or because it's a trend or because do what you truly believe in. There's enough copycats out there. That's where I think you're going to see success and differentiation, is really doing the thing that's true to you and what you're passionate about. That's number 1. Number 2 is, and I said this earlier, but treat others how you want to be treated. I can't stress that enough. People think and I think this is a behavior of the past, but people being anonymous online, leaving hate, or think about how
cowardly.
Exactly. Would you want that? Think about, create a space for others that you would want for yourself.
That's right.
And then number 3, stay positive. There's a lot of negativity out there. There's a lot you can get drowned in. You can just spend hours online doom scrolling, but stay positive. Understand that, despite all the chaos that's on the news and craziness that's happening, we are progressing slowly but surely. Things are getting better, and keep that attitude. And I think if you can maintain that every morning, waking up, knowing that, like, we're blessed to be here, we get to do something, not we have to do something.
That's right.
We're oftentimes in a position now that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we prayed to be in this position. And now we're looking at the next thing, but be grateful, take time to understand that life isn't that bad. Things are obviously crazy in the world, but try to maintain a positive mindset, and it really will help you.
Man, I want to thank you for that reminder, as you just even spoken to me. And I try to take every day from a positive point of view and embrace it as such. But we're human, and sometimes that doesn't happen because, life is lifing. But it was great. I want to thank you for that reminder. I also want to thank you for being a reflection of this. I had the pleasure of meeting you years ago when we were both at Nike. I don't even think we worked together.
No.
But it was something literally where the gravitation to the energy for both of us was so mutual, and ever since then it's done nothing but grow. And this is another confirmation of why. So I want to applaud you. If you want to call it flowers, we're gonna give them. I deem you in a very high respect, and I'm here supporting you to ensure that you continue to thrive in the spaces that you're in, and want to remind you that you're so needed. You're so needed and you're so valued, and I appreciate you greatly, man.
I could say the exact same thing for you. Incredibly grateful to get on, and obviously even more grateful to just have you as a friend. And we're all lucky to have you as a positive light in the world. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for creating.
We truly appreciate your support because it helps us fulfill our mission of promoting cultural awareness and personal development. Please click the subscribe button below to help ensure and solidify our mission.